Hello, ovarians. Just thought I'd pop in a couple of quick notes before we kick off this podcast properly. First of all, I want to welcome my new patron, Lee Ann. Hello, lovely. Thanks heaps for signing up at my Patreon to support the making of this podcast. It's the only money I am making currently, so I see you and appreciate you. And if anyone else would like their own shout out, head along to Patreon, search my name, and you too could have your own fridge magnet. I know. It's amazing. Secondly, a content warning. This podcast with the just lovely Miriama Kamo touches on the subject of miscarriage. Miriama is warm and open and is still laughing, but I realize it can be a very difficult discussion for some, so I wanted to let you all know that it was coming and you can make your own decisions about listening from here. Back to the podcast. Cue the music. Hello everyone, kia ora koutou, haere mai, and welcome along to Showy Ovaries, a podcast where I, peering under the undergarments of perimenopause and menopause, Penny Ashton, learn all I can about the vagaries of the vagina and the secretions of the sweat glands before my ovaries resign from service. A quick reminder, as always, that I am not a doctor, but I do have a certificate of merit from St. Joseph's School, Papanui, 1983, for my prowess in sport. In no way related to this topic, but I thought it might surprise you. Also, this is maybe podcast 21 or so, and I'm really running out of ideas for this section. Anyway, today's guest may not be a doctor, but was maybe competing against me at various sporting fixtures, as we both grew up only a year apart in age in Otautahi, Christchurch. And maybe we were both drinking at the same time in Bentley's bar at Canterbury University. She's of Ngāi Tahu and Ngāti Mutunga ancestry, is a journalist, a TV presenter, most recently on Marae and Sunday. And in another string to her bow, she just published a children's book in Te Reo Maori, The Stars of Matariki. So please give a warm and sparkly welcome to Showy Ovaries to Miriama Kamo. Hello.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, kia ora. Ke te pehe koe?
Hi, tino whaio, me koe?
Good, good. Excellent. Oh, yeah, you probably said, am I okay too? That's the thing. My Māori ran out to a certain... That's terrible.
Oh, it's very impressive.
I'm glad.
And you? And you're well?
Yes, I am well, thank you. Well, it's all a bit bloody weird, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Weird, yeah.
Yes, these timings, especially for the arts. But, sometimes I actually feel, it's really tricky sometimes when you're using Te Reo and you don't want to seem tokenistic, but then you want to use it. So that's something that's quite hard. Do you have any advice for people around that sort of thing?
Just keep using it. It's wonderful. It might feel weird for you, but for me and I'm sure most Māori, it's just so normal to hear it for us that I only blink really when people don't try, for me. That's
right.
Kind of like, that's weird.
Right, okay.
That's
good.
Pronunciation's not a terrible thing, as long as you're trying.
Because that's the thing I think terrifies people of getting it wrong that way and offending.
Yeah. No, I'm always very happy to hear people speaking Te Reo. And as long as I can hear that they're trying, then the pronunciation thing is not a huge deal. But hopefully, it's awkward for both sides when you want to correct somebody's pronunciation, but you don't want them to feel bad. So, the most important thing is just to, show that you have the heart and the will to give it a shot.
Yes. And, it's funny too, because I know that some people felt like, because when I was in Germany, I wanted people to tell me when I was getting it wrong. So, I would welcome that.
I think we carry in this country such an emotional load. There's a huge emotional load for Māori and for Pākehā as we try and figure this out together. And so nobody wants to be offending each other. Everybody wants to, so many want to get on board and be in this together, but there's such sensitivity and concern about whether or not we're doing it the right way, we're going to hurt or upset each other. And so, that's teething problems. Yeah. We're such a young country. We just have to keep on keeping on and staying engaged in it.
Absolutely. And now I just want to say that I was watching your Top Twins story. I'm sure you've had a lot of feedback on this story.
Yeah.
For those of anyone's listening from overseas who might not know who the Top Twins are, though I'm sure their fame is wide and reaching. They're New Zealand entertainment icons and legends, basically, and they've both been diagnosed with breast cancer and one for the second time. But it was really moving. Was that must have been, is that a weight of responsibility to tell a story like that?
Yeah. Yes, it always is with every story, when people trust you with their lives, that's always a big responsibility. And of course, these are national treasures and
absolutely.
And they really are wonderful, wonderful human beings. And so, I felt enormously privileged to be trusted with this huge moment in their lives. And so, there was definitely a weight of responsibility to get it right.
Yeah.
And so the only opinion I really, really wanted at the end of it was theirs. I'm so glad that the rest of the country really resonated to the story and really cared and loved the way that it was told. That's, we had wonderful feedback. But the only opinion that I really wanted was theirs, and they were happy. And so that was wonderfully satisfying.
I mean, there are obviously big stories, but that one just sort of like washed over everybody. It must be quite, like to have a story like that everyone is talking about, even though it's really sad. And also it helped generate an enormous amount of money for them for their Give a Little, which sounds mercenary, but I'm a performer. All of my work's been decimated. All of their work's been decimated. And then facing something like this and then being part of that was over $100,000 was within like 2 days or something.
Yeah, I'm so pleased for them because, as you know, like COVID has just absolutely crushed people and the performing arts has really suffered.
Mm-hmm.
And so they haven't had any income for the last 2 years. It was cancelled. And so, to have that and to have these cancer diagnoses to deal with was just terrible time. So I'm so pleased that this is translated into something really useful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kapai on that. Absolutely. That was amazing. Yeah. Right. Okay. Now we have limited time because you're off to be a reporter in other places. So I shall get to my long introduction. Now, some people have been a bit, I don't know. Somebody said, I think I fell asleep after that. Was Peter Mathias. She said she fell asleep after her long introduction. But I find it very difficult to summarize people's genius into a short space. So there's quite a few paragraphs, so brace yourself. So here we go. Miriama Kamo was born in Christchurch in 1973 and educated there all the way through a BA in English, which I hated English at Canterbury. Did you have Professor Cochrane?
Oh, I don't remember. No, I just remember I loved all my English courses I did. I love reading. Good. I was like, what? I just get to read all these books and it was awesome, especially the New Zealand literature course. I loved that.
Right. Well, that's good for you. Deeply bored. Anyway, but then she went to the prestigious Christchurch Broadcasting School. Once graduated, her obvious talents were immediately recognised and she was snapped up to present a kids' science show, Get Real, and was a reporter on a great program that I loved, which has been hardly anything like since, which was Backchat. So imagine a television show dedicated to the arts. What a crazy idea. And I actually won Letter of the Week on it once. It was about Elgin's marbles.
Oh.
Because I got a classics degree and I'm a wanker. So, yeah.
We loved you on Backchat.
Oh.
We did.
Me?
Yeah. Yep. Your name was out there. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Oh. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, I was a publicist at the time, so I was getting people onto it. But
maybe that's the connection there. But your name was not unfamiliar.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, yeah. I was very. I was like, when they read my name out on television. I was on a Sunday night watching it. But anyway, I haven't talked so much to people during their introductions, but here we go. After a brief sidestep to manage an art gallery in Sydney, she came back to New Zealand and was sucked up into the mothership, TVNZ, and has basically been there ever since. She has filled in to report One News and on Breakfast, was a weekend anchor for TVNZ7, presented Kiwi Living and 2020, and has brought us some really hard-hitting stories on Marae and Sunday. She's also a previous judge and now patron of the Kiwi Bank New Zealander of the Year Awards. She's also been really open on her journey around loss from 6 miscarriages, about being wahine Maori in the media landscape, about her mourning of the previous loss of Te Reo Maori from generations of tangata whenua, and about her endometriosis and, pertinently, early menopause. So one more time, please welcome superstar Miriama Kamo. Hello.
Hello. Kia ora. That was a lovely introduction.
I'm glad. And how do you feel hearing all of that?
It's lovely to hear it all. I don't think I dwell too much on. I'm just realising, having you asked that question, I think I probably don't dwell on the things that I've done.
Right.
Really, possibly. And now I'm thinking maybe I should dwell on it a little more. I don't know.
Well, I hope that is a side effect of such things. I think to hear it all put in one place, sometimes you just think, we're just muddling, getting from one thing to the next. And then you sit down and look back at what you've done and realise that you've done well and you've done a lot.
That's so nice. I think it's also a Kiwi thing of like, I've learned that the fastest way to move on from compliments is to say thank you. And, not to resist them, so that because then it's dropped straight away and you can move on. And I think that's probably a really Kiwi thing of trying to move away very quickly from the nice words.
That's exactly right. So one thing, actually, I think I'll jump straight into my first question, which I've been asking everybody, which I think plays into a certain aspect of what I said. But what is your relationship with your body been like in your life, and what journey has it been?
Sorry, that's
Small
Luna.
dog in the background.
Nutty thing.
Okay. So what is your
with my body?
And I was also wondering about, in that space of being a Māori reporter, and what journey that's been on. I imagine has been quite an arc, given how much more accepting we are of Te Reo in the workspace where you work now, etc. But anyway, over to you.
Okay, so, for the first part, sorry about that yapping dog. The first thing about, the relationship with my body, it's just always been an evolving thing. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. So we're in a marriage with ourselves, really, aren't we? And the trick is to stay in a good relationship as much as you can and to bring yourself back to that state.
That's so true. Don't have an abusive relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
As much as with anyone else. I never thought of it that way.
And so I've certainly gone up and down over the years. I think I've always had a generally pretty solid sense of self, but we can easily get taken away by that kind of the sort of frippery of, the cosmetic side of things. And when we feel like we're not looking good, I think we don't often look at deeply enough about what the source of that discomfort is, and usually it's because on the inside you're not doing what you need, and then we sort of project all of that onto the outer canvas. And so I've particularly with this menopause journey, I've had to really stay in that relationship with myself and go, it's okay.
Right.
You're okay. This is all right. I have no problems with being in menopause. Got no worries about that at all on an intellectual level, but the way that the hormones swirl around, that really challenges your sense of feeling settled, feeling tau, we say in Māori. And so, at the moment, probably the relationship is a little bit like being on a bit of a choppy ocean. And but at the same time, age has brought some wisdom around that, so I can manage it and understand what's happening and bring myself back to feeling settled and accepting. But over the course of my life, I think like any young woman, there've been moments where I've felt very good and moments when I've felt really terrible about my body. But again, returning to that notion of age equaling wisdom, I just now think my body is the most magnificent machine.
Marvelous.
And I'm like, I only get one of these. It's not like I can trade this one in and get a better model.
Yeah.
So let's take care of this one that I have. And wow, look how it tries to look after me. And if I do the same back, then we're in quite good concert together.
Right.
But it is a constant thing of remembering all of that.
Right.
Now, the second part of your question, what was the second part?
It was about like being Māori, so your body, being Māori in the media landscape and how much that's evolved.
So I can look back on this with the benefit of hindsight. So number one, I've had an amazing career and I've been really well supported.
Great.
And, I have very few negative experiences of being in this industry and being at TVNZ in particular, who has really held me, which has really held me rather. But at the same time, there were things, earlier in my career, it's actually been in many ways a very lonely and isolating sort of experience of being Māori in mainstream. There are very few who have walked this path.
True. And
stayed in mainstream so long. And what I'm realizing now is that there was a particular trauma with that, which I'm trying to work through, because when there aren't other people around who understand you culturally, you have to sink or swim, and you have to make some sacrifices and you have to choose your battles. And so there were a lot of times where I felt, completely unsupported. And it wasn't that people wanted me to feel that way. They just didn't know they didn't understand my cultural context, and I didn't have others around me that could support me in expressing it as a young reporter. So I'm really realizing now how hard that was, and just sort of making my peace with it. And, what I've said through my career to young Māori reporters is, please come into mainstream, because the more of us that there are, the easier it'll be. And it's just so wonderful now to see more and more Māori being interested. At the same time, we still have those cultural blocks where there is that concern for young Māori coming through, that they won't be supported, that they will be isolated and alienated and all that kind of thing. And I totally get that, because that was my experience.
Are you trying to lead away with that to sort of make people feel more welcome?
Yeah. So there's a lot of mahi being done, not obviously not just by me, by a lot of different people to improve the environment. A lot of Maori working very, very hard towards making this happen, but also a lot of Pākehā and a lot of wonderful goodwill and understanding and welcoming and embracing of diversity and inclusion. So this couldn't be a better time for Māori to come into this industry. There's still a long way to go, but I don't feel that Māori coming into this industry, into mainstream, will be the experience that I had. And so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to your body. So you must have oh my God, so you've had endometriosis and then 6 miscarriages and then early menopause. I can't even, and then the fact that you've managed to have a child is a bloody miracle, really, isn't it? It's like your body really did not want to have children. Mine has never wanted to have children from the head down. But I mean, God, how do you deal with that? I just think that 6 miscarriages is something I can't even begin to fathom. So, yeah.
So I think this sounds ridiculous. I was probably lucky in a little way in that I lost one pregnancy and then after that I had my girl.
Oh, right.
And so, I didn't have this sort of endless parade of miscarriages, and which then resulted in having a child at the end of it. Yeah, so I had one miscarriage, which was very painful because then I realized how much I really wanted to have a baby.
Right.
And then I had Te Reo, and that really cushioned the following 4 losses because I kept thinking, well, you know what? I've got a baby, and she was a great distraction. But then the 5th one was very painful because it was the longest lasting one. We also found out that it was a boy, and we had something to bury, which we didn't have with the other losses. They were early pregnancy losses. Right. And so the first and the last were the most painful, but the last was also, actually both of the first and the last ones were also really wonderful in that they really taught me, so much. I learned so much from those 2 babies. And, when I think about that last wee one, we called him Rakato. When I think about Rakato, I still feel the joy that I felt when I saw that I was pregnant with him, because I'd been in bed for a month thinking that I had clinical depression for the first time. And the minute I saw that I was pregnant, I just remember it just lifted straight away. And I was like, okay, my hormones, I get it. I'm pregnant. And also just the joy of seeing that I was pregnant again. And he was such a beautiful little soul to carry. And so I still have that sense of him as a beautiful little soul in my life. And so, so it was very hard, but also there were blessings in it. The endometriosis thing, the other thing I was going to say about that is that my body did want to have children. I managed to get pregnant 7 times.
Yeah,
so
really?
It was like, come on, we can do it. And then it just didn't work out, and most likely because of the endometriosis and the other hormonal issues that I had. Also, they came later in life. So I was at a higher risk anyway, being an older mother.
Yeah. They call that geriatric pregnancy, don't they?
I know. After 35, I think, or 37 or something, then you're a geriatric mother. Well, I had my first, my baby when I was 37. So I was clinically an old woman.
An old woman, right, okay. So now when did you tip into menopause? Because it was early, because you're only a year older than me. So when did it start for you?
Well, it's kind of felt like for me, like Rakato came along to tell me, that's it, Mama, you're done.
Right.
There's no more.
Right.
Yeah. And so it wasn't long after I lost him that my period started going haywire. And then, I think 40... what was I? It must have been 44 or something like that.
Oh, wow. That is early.
Period stopped altogether. And I did know that I was running this risk anyway, because I would often have my FSH levels and everything tested just to see whether, how likely it was that I could get pregnant and all that. So I could see that it was tracking down. So it wasn't a huge surprise. Also, I don't think my mum will mind. She went into an earlier menopause.
Right.
So I was quite fortunate in that sense that I had quite a lot of time to get used to the idea.
Yeah, so you knew about it, because a lot of people don't know anything about it. So you knew about menopause?
Oh, a little bit, yeah. Mainly I just knew that I'd probably go into an early one.
Right.
And
when I say, obviously people know about menopause, but they didn't know the extent of what the symptoms could be. So were you aware of those?
No, I didn't know how extensive they could be. I thought I'd get hot flushes. Yeah, that was and skin crawling. When I was a young journalist, I did a story about HRT around that WHO
right.
study that
Was wrong.
Yeah, and so I knew from talking to menopausal women then what a lot of the symptoms were, but they were classic sort of symptoms. They didn't talk about things like anxiety and brain fog, so those probably have been the two biggest problems
One's for you.
for me. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So when you started to get anxious, did you put it together with menopause or did that take some
No.
time? Right.
It took a long time, yeah. The other thing I should say is that I had a complicating factor and quite a significant one, in that I have very low blood pressure and I didn't realize how low it was. And so low blood pressure can also create these issues.
Right.
And so to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure where to shoot them to.
Yeah.
But both of them can create those issues. So my main thing is to say to women, get a health check, make sure that everything's as it should be. And then by the process of elimination, you can figure out what it is. Mine's just a little bit mucky because we can't quite figure out where the symptoms should head to. But I do know that both of them cause these symptoms. So if you think you're going crazy, don't assume you're going crazy.
Yeah.
Just assume maybe I'm going into perimenopause, which is the period before you hit menopause, and that your hormones are all over the place.
Yeah, that's the problem about not knowing, as you say, is it this, is it something else? And so that you go to the doctor and talk about it, obviously, is the most important thing. So your mother, did she talk to you about her symptoms of menopause at all, or?
Not really. She reckoned that she didn't really have any. She said that she remembers getting a couple of times that of getting slightly pink and slightly sweaty, and would ask Dad if it looked like that, and he'd say no, and then they'd be fine. So she reckons hers was not too bad.
Right, okay. And have you discovered any cultural things around Te Reo Maori with menopause?
Yeah, a little bit. So menstruation, for example, wasn't a terrible thing. It was something that was actually celebrated as a time in your life where you got access to different kinds of wisdom and knowledge. And so, fertility in Māoridom has always been sacred. And this is something that I talk about to women all the time, is we treat these things as, menstruation, menopause, motherhood, miscarriage, we treat them as if they're taboo, but they're really not. They are sacred experiences of womanhood. And that is how we should regard them. And if you regard them as sacred, it's impossible to feel angry, or to reject it, or to not be able to step into the power of it, I think.
Yeah, it takes away the shame.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's stolen from us, this idea that we should treat these things as something quiet and shameful and embarrassing. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and so I was reading that you're keen to try and talk about it as much as possible now.
Yeah, I do. I talk about it all the time. No problems at all. When I first started going into menopause, I thought, this is not going to be a secret. I don't care what people think of me. This is a very normal part of womanhood.
Right.
And I'm so lucky that I've gotten to an age where I can have this experience, because it's a privilege to live this long, in this world that we live in.
Yep.
I'm lucky. And so let's talk about it, and let's try and remove some of the shame about it, around it, and step into the power and the beauty of it, so that when it is hard, we can remember the good stuff as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've never really stopped to think about, obviously, because in days gone by, menopause was not that long before people's life expectancy, etc. And obviously, Māori have a lower life expectancy, which is why, to me, people complaining about this new Māori Health Authority can get in the sea, because obviously the way, status quo is not working to the same extent that it could be. So that's an interesting question that way around Māori life expectancy and women's life expectancy, etc.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. And even, if you're not Māori, whatever your background is, whatever your heritage is, it really is, when you look globally, it is such a privilege to live to this age, to be able to go through this step.
Yeah.
And especially in this country, we, most of us get to do it with a modicum of privilege. And when we look at places like Ukraine, for example, we're not dealing with war and all the rest of it. We may have poverty, massive poverty issues, but we don't have to do that with bombs dropping around
absolutely.
us. We can speak. We have the freedom to speak and to say how we feel.
Because imagine, like Iran and places like that, like where women are, have to cover up. Like, it would be interesting to know how comfortable they are to talk about things. I mean, I talked about to Anjan Rahman. She was fantastic and she was really open, but she talked about the oppressive, regimes that hold women back, etc. The other thing, of course, around Māori, just poverty with healthcare, is that menopause, so much of menopause stuff is expensive to deal with. To go to doctors, to go to specialists is prohibitively expensive. A lot of the really good medicines aren't actually funded in New Zealand. So maybe that's something that the Māori Health Authority could look at as well, around inequity with medicines.
Yeah, actually. I think generally our medical profession, it could do with a little tune-up and not treat periods as the same for every girl and woman. So for example, I didn't know that my painful periods were unusual until I was 31.
Oh, wow. Endometriosis is really painful, isn't it?
It's really, it's different for different. Well, you can have very bad endometriosis and not much pain, and then you can have a little endometriosis and have crippling pain. And, the wisdom around this is not widespread enough, I don't think. I've been to enough doctors. I've got great doctors now, but I've been to enough doctors in my time to know that there's not that much knowledge about women's fertility and reproductive systems and how you manage them and how every woman's different and we have different needs and different pains and so on. And so having any kind of one solution fitting all is not actually okay or acceptable. It leaves young women without the education and resource that they need to manage what should be a very normal part of their life.
Absolutely. And so did you find, one thing with endometriosis, does menopause stop the pain? Or did you have a Mirena or something like that?
Well, actually, the miracle for me was that Te Reo stopped the pain. So for some women, having a baby is the end of the pain. And that was what happened to me. And I remember having my first period after she came and thinking, oh no, here it comes, and nothing. I had no pain.
Oh my God.
And then the second period came along and I was like, well, this time, and then nothing. And then I began to realize, I'm not going to get pain. Oh, I'm never getting pain
Holy
again.
shit. I mean, obviously this child is a miracle as it is, but then she is the cure. Oh my God.
Yes, it was the cure.
Yes. That is amazing. Look at that.
It was so wonderful.
That is
so
wonderful, right? And have you found, but did your brain fog and anxiety and stuff, did it affect you in the workplace at all?
Yes, it did. So because when you don't know what's wrong with yourself, but something's not right, and then of course that causes more anxiety, and then the symptoms become worse. Yeah. And so I stepped out of news reading because I didn't want to do anything live.
Right.
And so I was like, I I'd just make up excuses for why I couldn't news read. I just recently went and saw the wonderful woman in the newsroom who does our rosters and said, look, there's an article coming out soon where I'm admitting what happened. And you know how you said make excuses to you all the time and it was really irritating for you. This is what it was about. And I didn't want to say so at the time because I thought I was worried that people might go, well, she's over the hill, better farm her out of here. And so I worked hard on everything else that wasn't live.
Yeah, wow.
To make up for it. But it was probably quite sort of weird and confusing time for those who were having to deal with me saying, I can't because, and making up, reasons why I couldn't be there. So it did affected me quite a lot.
And so that's what, isn't it interesting that you're someone who's so open and so prepared to talk about it in some ways, but in the workspace, it's always trickier because you don't want, it's why I think it's important for everyone to know about menopause, but some people don't want that to be the case because they feel that they'll be judged differently. But do you think if this woman was better educated around menopause, she might have been more understanding, or you would have felt better to talk about it?
She's not at fault at all. In fact, I dare say she was already approaching it herself, going, so it wasn't her fault, even remotely. And I think she would have been really understanding if I'd been brave enough to tell her. I think she would have just been absolutely fine with that and said, oh, okay, no worries.
Do you wish you had now, or?
I don't have any regrets about it, really. Because I just didn't feel confident at that time. But what I was doing at the same time, weirdly enough, was that I was doing public talks about menopause.
Right.
So I had a line in my keynote where I would say, there's 500 people here today. I've got no worries telling you I'm in menopause. It's no big deal. I just, have no worries whatsoever. The complicated thing is I haven't told my boss yet.
Yeah.
And
you were telling 500 people.
Well, I would tell 500 people and tell them that, and they would all laugh. And then I'd, another line was, that announcing that you're in menopause is like announcing the end of your sexuality or lobbing a grenade at your career. that sense that there are going to be consequences
Yeah.
for telling your workplace in particular about this. I
Absolutely.
can tell everybody else in the world, but I cannot tell my workplace. But anyway, last year I did go and tell my boss, and he couldn't have been more fantastic. He didn't blink an eye, in fact.
Great.
He was just like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, right. Well, I'd said I might do a story about it. And he was like, yeah, well, maybe we can support you run that. And we could maybe, and he started planning other things like, oh yeah, we could do a story here and da-da-da-da. And I was like, oh, this is so awesome. He just doesn't, it's just not a big deal for him at all.
And the change in just 2 years has been enormous, hasn't it? Just with the coverage.
Yeah.
Etc.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. And have you talked to any other colleagues now about it at TVNZ?
Well, because I've told the world about it, I don't I talk quite openly with men and women about it, but I don't bring it up unless it comes up in some way, or maybe I'm having some kind of symptom and I'll be like, oh, menopausal flush or whatever.
Right, okay.
But I've always been like that. It was really just the top brass that I didn't want to bring it to their attention in case they had a negative reaction to it. But anyway, they didn't, and they couldn't have been more wonderful.
It's so great because that's not always a given, isn't it? And especially in the media.
That's completely right. Yeah, because it's a visual form, and so we grow and age publicly in this industry.
And historically, they haven't had a good track record with it, with your Judy Baileys and, and like who is that? Hillary Barry is the oldest woman, is she not, on TV?
She is, yeah.
Yeah, and she's
not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, try and drag her out of the building. It would be
I feel like she could stay there for the rest of her life and we would all be thrilled about that.
I think so, absolutely. And she's so funny, absolutely. Right, now you have to go soon. So is there anything else that you wanted to talk to around menopause or anything you wanted to say about it at all?
No, not really. Only that the more of us that speak about it and the more of us that are open about it and the more of us that don't care about people's reaction to it or feeling judged by it, and the more we normalize what is the normal, let's normalize what is normal in women's lives, the better it becomes for everybody, for men and for women. Men shouldn't be blocked out of this conversation. They should know what their wives are going through and not moan or complain, just to understand.
Has your husband been good?
My husband's amazing. He's so amazing. He's been amazing through every part of my journey. Endometriosis, he couldn't have been more. He's a beautiful human being.
Lovely.
And for him, it's all just been a part of who I am, and so it's just not been a big deal at all. And that's how I would love it to be for all women, that no one's rolling their eyes when they're, in discomfort for any reason, that they just go, oh, okay, I see what's going on. Do you want a cup of tea?
Yeah. My husband's been great too, because I've been having some vulval issues while we're sharing. Yeah, and he took a picture of it for me. It was entertaining.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
He's been delightful as well. It makes a huge difference. So, my heart goes out to people that don't have someone like that to take a picture of their fanny when they
That is so cool. I love that. Was there anything that you wanted to know particularly before we do wind up?
About your good self? I don't know. I could talk to you for hours, but you have to go and report other stories. But I just think that people like you being out there and being open is just absolutely what we need. And as I say, this last couple of years has been incredible. I know that somebody else pitched a menopause documentary to certain people in the media and was told, no, that's just too women focused. So it's still there, definitely.
I remember early in my career wanting to do a story about early menopause, and I had someone that was in their 20s in Australia. And I remember the response from one person at the time being, who wants to hear a story about dry vagina? And we did it though. Good. We went ahead. But it was not an easy sell. And now, I don't know. I think people are more open to hearing the different stories of what is actually a normal part of our life. We're not here without any of these things.
No.
No one is alive on this earth if there aren't women going through menstruation and right through to menopause.
Yeah, and I've said this a lot on this podcast, but that's what boggles my mind is that our reproductive system are the thing that people the world, and it should not be encompassed in shame because we wouldn't be here without it. And, and for a young man to say that, it's like, you came out of one of those maybe, or cut out the top. But it's like without a vagina, you wouldn't be here. So stop being a little dick. And it feels like it's sort of like a Skittles approach in a way. So I think first of all, the thing that there was so much shame around that people got over was pregnancy. I feel like that was the first one. And then periods and menstruation and period poverty. And now this is sort of the last frontier that I know about anyway, around the woman's reproductive system that we just have to embrace and stop judging and being shameful for.
Women are talking about it more and more, aren't they? It's just awesome. I just love hearing all this conversation and this openness, and it's just exactly what's needed.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Oh, but first, congrats on your book, The Stolen Stars of Matariki. So that's been going really well, hasn't it?
It did go, yes, it's gone really well. But actually I've got a new one coming out in June, which is called Matariki Around the World, a cluster of stars, a cluster of stories. And I wrote that with Professor Rangi-Mātāmua, who is our preeminent Matariki expert in the country, who has actually delivered us all a new public holiday, which is going to be launched in June.
Yes, absolutely. Hooray for public holiday. Well, I mean, I imagine I've been self-employed for so long, I don't really know what a public holiday is, but nonetheless, I think it's bloody marvellous. So these books are in Te Reo, but have they been translated as well into English?
So these two books that I've written are in English, but the first one, Stolen Stars, that's in Te Reo as well. But we do also, I'm also a publisher of sorts, along with our amazing trust of Kotahiro Poka Poka. So we translate books into Te Reo. So we're working on translating 100 books. By the end of this year, I think we'll be on to sort of about 15.
Right.
Things like Harry Potter and
Jane Austen.
The Places We Go. And I'd love to do a Jane Austen at some point. Like anything's up for, we've got The Old Man and the Sea. So everything's there. We were doing the Edmonds cookbook. So we're trying to, because there are very few books available in Te Reo for readers that aren't babies.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
so
true.
We're trying to fill that gap, fill up the pātaka.
Right.
With amazing, real offerings, so that at any stage of your journey, you'll have something
fantastic
to read.
Well, on that note, I will say goodbye. And ngā mihi nui. Thank you very much for coming along and talking, and have a wonderful trip to Wellington. And good luck with all your publishing ventures and everything else.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend.
No worries. Okay. See you later. Well, that was the bloody lovely Miriama, who has been through so much, but is so open and honest about it all. And I just feel lucky to be able to bring her story and other women and trans people's stories to you all. Because I have a little confession. I've been a bit depressed about the future of live performances and so on in the past few weeks. I mean, it feels like we might be able to get into some sort of roller coaster like in Shakespeare in Love, where they go, the master of revels has decreed the playhouses be closed at the drop of a hat for some time to come. And I just really love being in the arts, and I don't want to pivot into a day job that I'm not passionate about, because I've worked for 20 years at this career and it was really going quite well. But anyway, talking to fabulous ladies, etc., has definitely salved those wounds and perked me up a bit. And next week, you lucky people, it's Jackie Clark. Songbird Jackie Clark is in the house, literally, because she came to my house and bought cinnamon buns. What a bloody superstar. Well, till then, please spread me about like cheap margarine on buns through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. Go to my website if you want to read some more about the gigs I'm not doing anytime soon. And feel free to drop me a line or, hey, a question. Oh, and in fact, I have a vagina expert coming up in a few weeks. No, not Leonardo DiCaprio, but Dr. Samantha Newman. So if you have any fanny business questions, fling them through to me and I'll fling them at her and see what sticks. Basically, I'm just trying to get a free consultation and you're all invited. So till next week, stay juicy, everybody. I've been Penny Ashton, signing off for Showy Ovaries.